All right, guys, welcome back to Trade Talk on the Late Night Collectors community. I'm your host, Nico, and joining with me today for today's episode, we got Chris. How's it going, man?
Hey, not too bad. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. And you guys can check us out weekly over here at the Late Night Collectors community. Of course, you may have seen Chris already over at the Comic Shop Talk, our weekly show where we talk about the new comic book releases that we've read week to week. But if you've not seen them over there, definitely go check that out. We got a whole playlist of 84 episodes and counting of Comic Shop Talk. That's our weekly show, as I mentioned. And you can also check us out. Sometimes Chris is also on episodes of Cracking Packs with the Chat, which is our card show that we do on there. We also just dropped a new recent episode of Cracking Packs with the Chat with Christine, who opened up a booster box of Pokemon very recently of the newest Pokemon card set. We're also doing a little bit of a cross promotion with the Late Night Chat Network, our sister channel, of course, where we kind of started doing these episodes originally. So go back and check that out, that YouTube channel as well, guys, if you've yet to see it. All kinds of great stuff over there. Chris has been on there a bunch of times as well. And we have weekly episodes of a show called Late Night Chat over there on the Late Night Chat Network as well. So definitely go check them out, subscribe, or vice versa. If this is your first time checking us out over here, please make sure to hit the subscribe button. But yeah, here on Trade Talk, we get into the collected editions, discussions of comic books, and we're going to be talking about the first two volumes of Walking Dead here. As I mentioned, I've read these before. First time getting back in the comics over 10 years ago, I checked these out, was a big fan of the show. I ended up getting caught up in the comics, at least through trade paperback releases. When the series ended, it killed me because I had to wait a few months to actually get that last paperback in my hand and read that. I think it was like 30 something volumes. Hold on, I'm looking at it right here. 32 volumes all in for the series, which I guess how many issues was it? I'll tell you here in 1 second. It's over. I think it was over 200 possibly issues. 193 issues of The Walking Dead were printed. So it was a massive hit for Robert Kirkman and Image Comics, and of course Charlie Adler, which was the artist on everything, starting with the second volume, but not the first volume, which we're going to get into first here today. Of course, Tony Moore was the original artist of the first 6 issues of The Walking Dead. Unfortunately, he decided to leave the series, and that was a big fucking loss on his part. Him and Robert Kirkman were in court for years following the success of the show as a result of this. Until they had to add his name to the credits because he wanted partial kind of like, you know what I mean? But listen, I think he was very fair to him from what I understand. I don't think he won his lawsuit to Robert Kirkman, but that's a whole other kind of can of worms there, that whole story. But I from what I heard, he was paid off very handsomely still, being one of the first creators of this book. But Charlie Adler, the guy drove over 180 something issues of the series when that artist left, right? So we'll get into the first volume here, Chris. Overall thoughts, though, Chris, reading this for the first time, since I know you had never read the comics, but you're a big fan of the show. What'd you think of this?
No, I freaking love it.
Yeah.
I think I'll be reading more of this on and read the rest of the run here. It was just great.
Yeah.
I'm just kind of even just seeing the ends of the first couple issues when they weren't sure that this was going to be anything. They're so happy that they sold like 2 or 3 thousand issues or something like that. It's like it's crazy. This is like lightning in a bottle. Like it's hard to say because you know what happened already. It's hard to say, like, if you were able to get your hands on this when it first came out, how excited you might have been, or, maybe just think this was like, whatever, meh, whatever.
Yeah.
But I thought it was great.
No, I totally agree with you. This is actually a real big treat for me to revisit these. And I was surprised at how much I still really enjoyed it. Not to say that I was expecting not to enjoy it, because, like, I own all the trades. I wasn't there on the ground floor, and the issues were too expensive to pick up and find once the series actually was
Yeah.
running.
Yeah. If you're watching that when the series came out, it was already too late.
And like you said, it's not that crazy of a concept to begin with. Like, it's a zombie story. So, like, obviously he made something of it, and it found its fan base and became a massive hit as a result of the TV show that it was. But to your point, there was only a couple thousand printed originally. Image, there's a famous story that Robert Kirkman has talked about, and I don't know if he talked about it in the back of the paperback that you read there, Chris, because we both read this digitally this time around. And we're also going to be talking about the new deluxe issues, which Image recently has been reprinting the single issues of The Walking Dead in color. So I think they're only on like 40 or 50 issues so far. But they're so you can still find Walking Dead on the stands now currently, but now it's in color. Originally it was black and white, just like the old zombie movies, which was the intention of what Robert Kirkman was going with. Also, it was because it was dirt cheap to produce as opposed to a color comic at the time. And Robert Kirkman basically had to take out, I think, like a loan in order to get this, like a loan on his house or something, I think, in order to get this comic produced and in order to pay his artist to kind of put this book out. So he was really banking on the success of this thing. And this is during a time Robert Kirkman was trying to like leave Marvel and go full time in his independent comic making with Image Comics before he became like on staff at Image Comics, before there was a Skybound imprint, which is his own fucking imprint. This is pre Robert Kirkman's success when he came out with this book, right? He was still writing for Marvel. He even did Marvel Zombies over at Marvel during the same time he was doing The Walking Dead, because they're like, oh, you got that Walking Dead book over at Image you're putting out. Hey, how about you do a zombie story with the Marvel characters? And he did, I think, 2 miniseries for Marvel Zombies. Yeah. Kind of a lot of fun. As well. Check those out if you guys are ever interested in those. I think they hold up pretty well, but yeah, it's basically him just doing Marvel's zombie versions of Marvel's characters, where they're all like, they're horrible versions of the characters. They're not like nice versions of the characters. Let's say they're just like they're all just eating people, right? They're cannibals essentially because they're zombies, right? But they still have the brains of the characters essentially. So it's much different from Walking Dead in that sense. But that being said, there's a whole story that he said when he pitched the book, they were going to cancel this title, Chris. I don't know if he talked about this in the back of the book that you read, but they were going to cancel the title, and he had to make up this whole story saying that, oh yeah, but you haven't reached the point yet at issue whatever where the aliens show up. And apparently, like, his editor, he's like, what are you talking about, aliens? He's like, oh yeah, on issue 10 or whatever, like, you're going to find out that the zombies are all because of a UFO or something like that. Aliens come into the play. He's like, oh, interesting. I got to see that. And they kept the book alive as a result of him teasing this thing that was never going to come. And then apparently the editor or something somewhere down the road, or the guy that got the book published, was just like, yeah, whatever ended up happening with that alien. He's like, I never intended to do that. Because he's like, that was like, they were going to cancel this fucking title. It just didn't find its audience at first, right? And then I guess over time, not only because of the success of the show, but because of, I guess, word of mouth, it just became a popular comic. So I miss getting in on the ground floor of this one. I wasn't reading comics at the time when this came out originally, and by the time I kind of got wind of it, I just started picking up the trades, right? So I had to wait. Like, I was always behind. So the spoilers for the Walking Dead comic were just as crucial as the show, if you remember, Chris. Like, you kind of couldn't talk to anybody at first if you didn't watch the episode, because you didn't want to hear who potentially died, or, you know what I mean? Like, it was very hush about that kind of shit, right? The show as well, right? But I loved revisiting this, man, and seeing it in color. It actually looked pretty good in fucking color, I gotta say. I didn't know if it would hold up the same. I know this is your first time reading it this way, but it was pretty nice in color, I gotta say. So we're gonna throw up our preview art here now, guys, for you, as we normally do with Comic Shop Talk too, as we kind of get through discussing this story. But I kind of just wanted to get our overall thoughts. And yeah, Chris, I don't know, I might end up reading my trades again too, or now reading it online digitally in the color, because I really enjoyed this revisiting it. I gotta say, yeah, it holds up. And honestly, the most impressive thing about these first 12 issues is how much fucking happens. And
exactly, that's what I was gonna say. Like, so much happens. Like, things move so fast in the comic, whereas, in the seasons, freaking, I think that Herschel stuff might have been like 2 seasons in. This, like, that Herschel stuff went by in 1 issue, 2 issues tops.
Yeah. So at the end of these 12 issues that we're going to talk about, they just make it to the prison. Now, the prison, if you guys remember the show, was in season 4 of the show. And this happens within a year's time of this comic coming out. Like,
yeah, 12 issues.
And it's the first 2 volumes out of 32 fucking volumes of the book. Now, that being said, I think that you could make the argument, because I have read the whole series, Chris, at a certain point, it does slow down in terms of the events that actually take place in the book. It just becomes more about the characters and about the relationships of the characters. And, like, I mean, there is an ever evolving cast, and there is like a lot of talk and growth of between all the characters and the events of the book. but I don't think there's as much like game-changing moments. But maybe I just don't remember it in that sense because I was watching the show as well at the same time. Maybe I was just too spoiled at the time because
Yeah.
I was just impressed at how much they fit in these first 2 volumes because I don't know if the events of the book happen as like there's a lot of shit that happens in the book where I think like we hadn't seen in the show or we did see in the show, but it just took forever to get to. But like all the big characters of the show, for that matter, are from the comic. Like the governor, Negan, these are all in the comic. Like other than Daryl, almost everybody that you've seen in the show is in the comic. So like, yeah, there's definitely a lot I'm probably taking for granted. I just in my mind, I don't remember the story going as fitting as much in terms of like location and movement of the characters and everything else. I think in the middle of this series, I think it dragged on for a period of time. That being said, I think it was always compelling. It was always well done. And yeah, I think it was a great series. There's a reason why I think it was so popular. And Robert Kirkman has gone on to much more other big successes in his career, right? But nothing as big as Walking Dead. Nothing will ever be, I think, as big as Walking Dead. Like you said, lightning in a bottle. Not a crazy concept, but just it just worked, right, at the time and
I guess the crazy concept for comics, because like there's no superheroes in there. Like, it's zombies, but I don't know. It's like as as a prototype for any other comic that's going out there, I imagine this would be something different.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is early days too, right? So like most of the Image, I think at that time was Heroes still like
Yeah, you figure coming out of the time of like freaking Wildcats or like just all these X-Men team clones that are coming out there. Then I got some black and white comic that's not very polished. The art was, I don't want to say it was bad, but it wasn't it wasn't the people in spandex suits where the girls are busting out of their tops and the guys are freaking chucked to hell.
Yeah.
It's just freaking regular people running around in there,
It's not, yeah, and it's a lot of panels of guys standing around talking, yeah, which normally in comics shouldn't work as well as it does in this book because it's not dynamic, and unless the conversation is interesting that the characters are having, it's really hard to do that kind of shit. Like you said, like it's not what you would expect of a comic book audience even at that time when this originally out, or what they would be looking forward to checking out, which I think is why they didn't produce that much at the time, which also why it almost got canceled and it had a trouble finding its audience at first, right? I think that there's I mean, that shouldn't come as any surprise, but I think it's just probably on the strength of the writing and the strength of how good the book was that it was able to survive. And then, like I said, shortly thereafter, the show came out too, which definitely helped. But yeah, but then the first season of the show, completely different than the direction they went with it afterwards, because Frank Darabont was the guy who did the first 6 episodes or whatever. You know what I mean? You know how the first season's like much different than where they went with the show after the second season? They kind of changed the whole direction of the story moving forward there as well, right? So anyways, let's get into it here. Walking Dead Volume 1, we're going to talk about first here. This is issues 1 to 6. And once again, what I'm going to be showing on the screen here, these are the deluxe versions of The Walking Dead, which are the issues that you can probably find more easily compared to obviously the original issues, especially early on here. Like this is issues 1 to 6. If you guys did want to seek these out, these are the original issues recolored, because originally it was in black and white. So they've just got a colorist now to come in and color these issues for the first time. And I think they did a pretty good job of it. It was kind of fun seeing this in color for me, revisiting it. And the artist on these first 6 issues, as I mentioned previously, is Tony Moore, who I much prefer, to be honest, to Charlie Adler. Charlie Adler, the issues that come after this, we're going to be talking about in the second volume, he definitely gets better as the series goes on. I mean, the guy drew a fucking 180 issues of the book. I would hope so. But in comparison, their styles, I much prefer Tony Moore's style, Chris. I don't know about you, but it's a shame he wasn't able to stick on the book, but I don't think he's an artist that's even all that active these days. So I think it's a good thing, because I don't think he would have kept up with the monthly demand that Charlie Adler did day in and day out. Like he put out that book on time. So, I mean, sometimes you just need a serviceable artist more than a very stylistic artist that's going to take fucking forever to churn out the work, right? What do you think of Tony Moore on art in this first book?
Like I said, I didn't notice the art one way or the other. Like if you told me that there was the same artist all the way through, I would have believed you either way.
Yeah.
So And, like, I can't see this artist trying to freaking sue whatever Robert Kirkman. This is all story. Like, you could have freaking this could have been stick people in it. Probably wouldn't have been just as good,
Mhm. Yeah, I don't agree with the fact that he should have got half of the success that they did, just because, like, sure, he
Yeah,
wasn't.
just because he drew it, unless he was part of the story or something, or he threw some stuff in there. But if he's just drawing the story, hey, you did what, that's what happens.
I mean, he's definitely should be credited as a co-creator, but from what I understand, I think he gave up that right when he moved on. So,
Yeah.
anyways, we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about the comic, but it's just interesting stuff that came out of this as a result that I've kind of heard over the years. Yeah. So the comic opens up with Chris. Sorry, Chris. Yeah, Chris, you're in the book here. No, with Rick. Being a cop as he is, and he ends up getting shot in the line of duty here, and cut to him in the hospital bed, which is kind of the intro to the.
Yeah. And I think the series pretty much mirrors this episode. The first episode of the first issue mirrors pretty, you know, authentically, let's say.
Yeah, yeah, it's beat for beat. I think you're right. Like, there's a lot of stuff that happens in this first volume that you definitely see in the show. Now, if we remember that as we go across some of the artwork here, I'll definitely point that out. Or Chris, same here, same with you if you remember any of that shit.
Yeah.
But yeah, this scene right out of the show, Rick wakes up in the hospital after getting shot. He's in a coma, doesn't know what the fuck went on. It's a ghost town, comes across zombies for the first time. Yeah, just an interesting start to the story, too. This would be fucking freaky if this actually happened to you. The fact that he somehow survived in this scenario is a bit of a stretch because, like, I don't know.
There's a few things you got to let go.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
this is one of them, and there's other ones coming up. But
Yeah.
once you get past that stuff, that's all good.
Yeah, absolutely. But there is a few things like that for sure. But yeah, so as you see here, he's stumbling around. Yeah, where is everybody? What's going on? Everyone on break at the same time, he says, right? He comes across this guy. I think he's just, I don't know, wounded or something. It just seems like a dead body again. It doesn't know he's waking up in the middle of a zombie movie, right? So he yeah, walks into this scenario, which Jesus.
Now, I was like when they see the zombies for the first time, it's like, you don't think they're zombies. Like, hey, buddy, relax. What's going on here? And they freaking just kind of keep on coming at you.
Yeah, yeah.
And, you think you can kind of reason with them or something. And that's, that was good in the series. That's good in this, and it was good in the comic here.
I like to like his dialogue always for the zombies because it's always like yeah or something. It's just like
No, yeah, glug.
the noises that he makes are always so fun. I feel like or Kirkman. I know it seems like such a simple thing to do, but like what else? What kind of dialogue you gonna write for a mindless zombie, right? So
Yeah.
I always get a kick out of the look of them when they do show up because like The Walking Dead, the zombies like in this book at this point in time. And again, I think it's similar to the show in the sense the longer it went on, they just became accustomed to the zombies and you didn't see them as often over time. But in these first two volumes, you see them all the time. They kill somebody almost every other issue, right? And they're kind of like a force of nature. Like they appear out of nowhere. All of a sudden, they're not on panel. Then the next panel, like like so I kind of dig that. Like the way the way like they cut scenes using the comic panels, the borders, obviously, and it's not like they're showing in one panel the zombie coming from across the way. They put the character in a scenario, and then the next panel or the next page when you
Yeah, and a freaking zombie on top of him.
zombies on top of him, right? And he's fucked. So I kind of like the way they use the structure of the comic book page or the comic book form, a way to sneak up on the reader and all of a sudden show that the zombie is going to basically kill this person, right? Like I always thought really well done because obviously that would be easier, I think, better to do in the form of like what they would do in the show or in the zombie movies, for instance, right? But I think that I think they did a pretty good job of it in the comic too. For that fact, I always kind of I dug that part about it, how they would come out of nowhere and I just doesn't have to be an explanation for it. It's fucking zombie. It just shows up. You better run, man. Like, so I kind of always like that about this book. But yeah, he kind of falls back. This guy snaps his neck open and he falls back on the stairs here and makes an escape. He doesn't know what the fuck's going on. He kind of leaves the hospital here, tries to get a car. And
Yeah, does he end up going home? And
yeah.
I guess you meet up with who's that character?
This was a scene in the show too, I'm pretty certain, when he sees this mangled up person in the grass and like they're at the point where like the body itself, like he can't actually get up out of the grass. I believe this was a scene in the show too, because like I think he was so horrified by this scene of somebody struggling in the grass and what was going on with them. I think this is again where he's finally taking notice of like, okay, like there's something going on here.
Yeah.
Like he kind of gets like a real good like straight shot of looking at it in this scene, and to the point where like he's crying about like how sad this moment is for this person, right? Like he doesn't really know the breadth of this, that he doesn't know the whole situation as of yet, still, right? Coming out of the hospital, but something's not right. What's going on here, right? So yeah, he goes back home to your point and gets attacked. And he gets attacked by a character who comes and goes in this scene, but of course you would know as Morgan from the TV show, who turned out to be a huge character who actually went on to one of the spin-off shows, if I'm not mistaken, from Walking Dead. I think Fear the Walking Dead, I think he was on, right? If I'm not mistaken. I know I watched this first little bit of that.
Yeah.
But yeah, he attacks him. He's with his son here. And if you guys, again, in the show, that was the case in the show. He does come across Morgan early on in the show, and then doesn't encounter him until later on. And that kind of happens in the comic as well. I mean, that's not kind of shown in these first two volumes, but he does come across somebody here. I think he is I don't know. Does he say he's the sheriff or that he's a cop in this? Because I think he's the
I
sheriff.
think he tells him he's a cop because he explains the whole thing. He's in his house, and I think he takes him to the police station.
Yeah,
so they grab some guns there and they grab cars.
Yeah, so here they are at the police station after kind of Morgan lets him in on like what's going on here. He lets him know what's been happening, kind of brings him up to speed a bit. And of course, his first thoughts are, I got to go find my family. And I'm sure they went to Atlanta because Atlanta is the closest thing where we have family. That's only a few hours from here. I'm sure that's where they went. I'm going to go search for them. And he kind of says like, I don't know about what's going on out there, but if it's cool, he's like, yeah, you stay out in my neighbor's house there. I'm sure that they would appreciate it. And just the things that he's saying in these moments is kind of fucked up because like, obviously he doesn't really have the outlook on the whole situation as of yet, like how some people have already lost hope at this point in time. He actually thinks like this is a temporary setback. Like it's kind of like how like at the start of the pandemic, they're like, yeah, just like level the curve or whatever. They're like, yeah.
Hey, just 2 weeks. Don't worry, we're all good after this. Nobody knows it's gonna last freaking 3 years.
Right. That's kind of like what the way he's talking and navigating this in here at the start. Because he's just like, I'm sure it's gonna be like this for a little while. So my neighbors, I'm sure, wouldn't mind if you hang out there. You'll take care of the place. And
they'll be happy to take care of the place while they're gone.
Yeah, which I thought was interesting, right? That he's talking like that at this point in time. Obviously, that's not how he talks, because that after a certain point in the book, he's just like, okay, well, this is the way of the world now. This is where we're at, right? When they find out they've lost all hope in like, in terms of the government and situation and everything else, right? So, but yeah, in this one, he's like, he's happy to help him out because he knows that he has all this ammunition and guns and police car. He hooks him up in this scene. He gives him a bunch of guns. He gives him a fucking police cruiser. He's like, yeah, don't worry. Here, take this shit. And, you be on your way. And I hope you wish you the best, but I got to get to my family. So we get like a brief interaction with him. And yeah, he kind of goes on his way from there. It goes towards Atlanta, right? Now, this scene coming up here is another big scene from the show, if I'm not mistaken. And that's the horse scene. That's a pretty big scene I remember from the first season as well of Walking Dead. In this scene, he comes across another house here that he goes into, and then he sees a horse in the stable, and he steals the horse to kind of ride into the city with, right, as he gets to Atlanta. And little does he know, again, he doesn't know the situation of how many fucking zombies are out and about here in the world. So
Yeah, I think that top panel there, that's the big scene there where he's on the highway with the horse
yeah.
going into Atlanta and see what's going on.
So he kind of just moseys on into Atlanta, like
Yeah.
downtown Atlanta in this scene on the horse, and just gets overrun by zombies, and they just eat the shit out of the horse. They just rip the shit out of it. And I believe that happens in the show too, if I'm not mistaken. It's been a while since I've seen that first season, but yeah, I believe that was a big scene there.
Yeah, doesn't he end up in a tank or something in the first one? And that's where he hears Glenn talking. So none of that sort of happens here in the comic.
Right. But he does come across Glenn after this. Does help him out. Yeah, as you can see, you're already getting this whole start of the show that was already within the first issue or two here, and you already get introduced to Glenn, which is a pretty good big character for a few seasons of the show as well. Of course, before his demise, of course, which kind of happened the same in the comic as well. So, but anyways, spoilers, but is a lot of big differences as well from the comic to the show. But yeah, there's horse getting ripped apart, pretty brutal. And there's Glenn, who like whisks him away down an alley, and they go across the rooftops. He explains who he is, what he does, coming to the city to find shit, scavenge for shit. And then he's like, okay, I'm going back to base camp. Also, like, kind of, it's interesting to point out at this point in time, because it's so early in this situation and they haven't really come across a lot of horrible people like they do on the show and in the comic. They're very trustworthy of other people at this point in time, which is something that they have to discard very early on in both the comic and the show, because they're just like, yeah, there's still some fucked up people out there that are going to take you're going to take advantage of the situation, right? There's people that are hungry out there. There's going to be people that want to kill you for food or whatever, what have you, right? So, but he brings him to the group here. And this is, again, you have to dismiss. You got to.
Yeah, like.
Yeah. The first place he goes in fucking Atlanta, he finds his family. She's his wife and kid, Carl.
Yeah, what are the chances?
Right.
Like, that's another thing you got to let go. But once you let go of that, it's good.
Yeah, I agree. That's one of the notes I wrote down. One of the few notes I wrote down for this is like, you really got to suspend disbelief for this scene in particular. The fact that he comes across his wife and kid that fast. But again, Kirkman keeps the story moving. He's not going to spend a whole fucking arc of him looking for his family. He's like, okay, let's get this fucking show on the road. This is the story I want to tell. There's the characters. They're together now. All right, let's keep going. Right. So I like how he keeps pushing forward in these first two trades. So yeah. So not only is his wife there and his kid Carl and a bunch of other people that he's meeting for the first time on the outskirts of Atlanta, but you also got his buddy there, Shane, who of course was played by what the fuck is his name? John Bernthal.
John Bernthal or something.
Who went on to do bigger and better things. He played the Punisher after this, a bunch of other shit in film and TV. He's done a good job for himself. And he was Shane, of course, on The Walking Dead, I think for the first two seasons before getting killed off. And that's the thing. I mean, again, jumping ahead a little bit, he gets killed off pretty fucking quick. He gets killed off in the first volume of this book, and he was a fucking big character on the show for a couple of seasons that he was.
Let's move along, and we can get to that when we go through these issues.
Don't worry. We're moving along, Chris. Hold your horses.
Jeez. Hold your horses. Let's go.
A lot of setup, my friend.
12 issues to go through here, man.
Listen, don't worry. It's the start. I get quicker as I go. All right. So now Shane here, they're out hunting. Yeah. There you start to see that there's some love between Shane and his wife when he was gone. And he gets warned about him. And, his, like, the fact that he doesn't know if he was with his wife. That old man tells him, what's his fucking name? Dale, thank you. Was also on the show. Sophia and Carol and Andrea and her sister, they're all here. And basically, you see that. This is a scene that you see on the show too. This is when they learn that they can put fucking zombie blood on themselves, and then they can hide from the zombies. And this happened in the show as well. And then it starts raining, and they basically have to fucking start running because they start to smell that they're humans and not zombies. So that was a pretty popular
And
scene.
this is still all the first issue, right?
No, this is past the first issue now.
Okay.
Yeah. The first issue is probably him just getting out of getting out of the hospital and getting on the road. Yeah. This is now we're like probably second or third issue now. So yeah, he almost gets bit here, but I guess it goes into his jacket, not not on him. And then again, this is you find out, him and Shane and his wife are having issues with one another. She says that's over now. Like that was a mistake that we hooked up. All shit that you've seen in the show. And then they're testing he's training all the kids how to shoot guns. Then there's a kind of whole interesting kind of storyline of him trying to give Carl his first gun, and he's only 8 years old. And there's like a big back and forth between him and the wife, whether or not he should learn how to use a gun at this point in time, which does come to fruition later on when he saves his fucking mom from getting eaten from a zombie. He shoots one of them, so it's kind of cool that Carl gets a gun this early on, I thought. And Andrea's sister gets killed here. And yeah, and then basically from here, Buddy here gets his arm bit that was with whose wife, I guess, had previously been killed. And this is the first time that you see someone actually transform into a zombie, but as he's getting sick and about to get killed, they kind of let him escape. They take him somewhere far away.
Yeah, I think it's let him hang out by a tree or something like that.
Which I'm sure is going to come back to bite them in the ass at some point. I don't remember that for a fact, but the fact that he's still out and about in the world, I'm sure that's a kind of interesting story that he can come back to at some point. But yeah, so then, they mourn for their losses here. Andrea's sister, Dale, kind of tries to get closer with Andrea there, it seems like, or I guess console her, but they do end up hooking up later. And this is when fucking the whole thing with Shane and his wife comes out. And he starts fucking crying in front of them and freaking them all out. They go out to hunt. Carl shoots him with the gun because he sees him and his dad get into an altercation, shoots him right through the fucking neck, killing Shane, and thus concludes the first volume of The Walking Dead. Was that fast enough for you there, Chris? Jesus.
I thought we were going through this issue by issue here. Sorry, man. I don't know. You're freaking running through shit now. I don't know where one issue ends and one issue starts.
This is all put together as one volume. So that's why I'm trying to say here, like I'm trying to pace it at a good pace.
Go on.
So yeah, what do you think of this is the first cover. This is the cover of the first issue ever of the Walking Dead in color here. Which is kind of pretty cool. I remember seeing this issue out and about. There was a time period where you could buy this for $1,000. I'm sure it's much more now, but like Chris had mentioned earlier on, there was only like it was a very low print run. I think there was 3,000 printed or something like that, crazy like that. So if you got this graded or something, this is probably fetches quite a bit more now with the success of the show, I would think. So yeah, that was the first volume of The Walking Dead, which again, a lot happens within the first volume. I mean, the whole Shane.
Yeah, that's what, 6 issues, right?
6 issues, yeah. The whole Shane scenario, the whole introduction to Carl and all those other people, Andrea, Dale, who I think was on the first couple seasons with the RV. That was a big part of the show. Yeah, you kind of get introduced to almost like the first main core group of characters that you see throughout the first few seasons of The Walking Dead. And you get the Shane death, and you get the whole setup of him going into Atlanta. There's a lot in these first 6 issues, man. I think it was a very good, fast introduction into this world and into these characters. And you're hooked right away, I think, after reading this first volume, man. What'd you think? Like, you really?
Yeah, it's a good read. And if you're going issue by issue, there's always a nice cliffhanger to bring into the next one.
Yes.
And yeah, it's great stuff.
Yeah.
And like I said, things move so fast here compared to if you're a fan of the show, reading these comics, it's just so much better. The characters might be a little bit different. Who's who? Like, I think, like I say, has Dale hooked up with Andrea yet or no?
Not yet. That happens in the second volume, which we're going to get into right now.
Yeah, like I imagine if you couldn't really see that happening in the show because that Dale character was not was a little bit different on the TV show than he was in the comic here, I guess.
Yeah.
And there's still stuff missing, I guess. With Daryl's brother, there's nothing. There's no mention of that where they freaking tie this guy up on the roof and He has
No,
to cut off his hand or something.
that was all stuff for the show only. Yeah, so Daryl,
Yeah.
Earl, whatever the fuck his name was,
Yeah, Merle, that's his name.
for a great casting and great characters for the
And
show.
it's great, and it's still great writing on them, the people that did the show, because they kind of took stuff out there and they threw in their own stuff, and the stuff they threw in seems to have worked pretty well.
Yes.
It's it might not be the story, but
Yeah,
I think it was good stuff what they did in the TV show as well.
To be honest, I think from hearing now what had happened behind the scenes, talking John Bernthal talking about it in the past, or sorry, most recently on a podcast, it's possible that his character Shane would have actually even stuck around longer in terms of the success of that character. They may have even chosen to go a different direction with it. Because I don't know if Kirkman was so beholden to that happening right away either because of the success of that character. But based off the relationships, I think of when Darabont left and Kirkman became like the main showrunner. I remember hearing recently on his podcast, him talking with one of the one that played Lori, the wife of Rick on the show, that actress. They wrote them both off the show because apparently they were not very happy about the change in direction of the show, and they were very vocal about that at the time.
Yeah, well, that's the bad part about those shows. Like if a character ended up having a better offer somewhere else because of the success of the show, it's like, well, all of a sudden we got to kill you.
They got to write them off. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So yeah, no, for sure. And that's why obviously I'm a purist in the sense that I prefer the comic over the show, but the show had some great stuff too. And like I said, basically the most famous character, maybe outside of Negan and maybe Rick, which is fucking Daryl, you could say is probably maybe the most popular even, never came from the comic. So yeah, very cool. Very cool.
I don't know. He's having a spin-off where he shows up in freaking Europe somehow. I don't know about that, but
all right. So moving along here, I don't want Chris to yell at me again, guys. Here's volume 2, issues 7 to 12.
Do these issues, like in the volume, does it not like specify when an issue ends and the new one starts, or it just goes all the way through?
Just goes all the way through, actually. Yeah. So that's the thing about but if you were reading it in the issues, it does end on a what do you call it? A cliffhanger, to Chris's point. Normally it was like a singular a splash page, like a full page art sequence would normally happen on the cliffhanger of the book. But I believe when it's collected in the trade paperbacks, I don't think there's chapter breaks, if I'm not mistaken. I can double check on that right now.
Actually. Yeah, because I thought like in that first time, I thought you're still talking about the first issue still. I'm like, what the heck's going on here?
Oh, so what I've
done, you might have been 3 or 4 issues in already. I didn't know that.
Yeah, no. Well, now it's more understandable. You freaking out. I'm taking 20 minutes.
I thought that was the first issue. I'm like, what the heck? When's the other stuff going to happen?
So what I did when I compiled the art for this is I basically just put a bunch of important pages that I felt to the storyline out of the whole trade paperback together in one slideshow. So basically, let's say
okay, I thought you were running through the first like page by page of the first issue. I'm like, whoa, what's going on?
Of course not. No, because not every page is important, right? I'm kind of just trying to cut to the most interesting scenes that I felt were, anyways. So like out of 120 pages of 6 issues of a comic, I maybe put like 50 of them up there, let's say, right? So anyways, there's no chapter breaks in the book. So that was the kind of the cool thing about reading it in the issues, from what I understand, was that you did kind of, those moments kind of hit a little bit more effectively. But when you,
it was nice to know when it hits you at the end, and then there's at least, okay, give it cover for the next chapter or for the next issue. But I guess the trades are good too.
Yeah, but you kind of did lose that a little bit, admittingly, because even me, when I was reading the trade, sometimes it would be clearly obvious sometimes where you're like, okay, well, that's the end of this issue. But then other times it would be like, I don't know where they would have ended this one, because sometimes it's like, it's kind of like more of an anticlimactic end, that being said, right? But that's the thing about the trades. You would fly through a fucking trade. It would come out and I'd be hotly anticipating it so badly to read it. I'd be like, holy fuck, I got to read this. I would be read within like an hour, and then I would have to fucking wait like 7 months again for the next one, right? It was the worst. It was, reading it in trade was the absolute fucking worst, because that everybody was reading in issues at the time or was way ahead of you, and you got to wait to fucking get caught up, not even to them. And then by the time you got caught up, you read it in like fucking, like I said, you would be done that trade in an hour. No chapter breaks, one sitting. That's how much I fucking devoured those trades when they came out.
Well, I can see why you would. It's a very engaging story.
Absolutely. Okay, so that was the first volume. So now we're talking about volume 2, which is Miles Behind Us, volume 2 of The Walking Dead. Again, we're talking about the color issues, the deluxe versions that are coming out right now. At least that's where we're showing the preview art from. But you can definitely find the old black and white paperbacks out there as well. Yeah, in mass production, these things. Okay, so again, worth noting, you have a different artist on this book now. At least right away, knowing that, you can see there's a bit of a difference. I think there's way more shadows, I think, that he incorporates in his artwork and the way he kind of draws the characters, and more blacks, like the inking itself. But seeing it in color, it's maybe not as noticeable, but at least knowing how it read when I read it in black and white, that was much more noticeable. But now that he's actually got color applied to it, it looks good. I like the color on this book quite a bit. So I gotta say, the addition of color. I don't know how I would feel now if I went back and read the black and white. I actually kind of like the color quite a bit, to be honest with you. So aesthetically, it's kind of cool, Chris. But I if you could continue reading them in color, this might be the way to go, man. If you want to continue reading it this way. The only problem is they're not all out in color yet. I think they're only up to issue 40 or 50 or something like that.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So it's still a long ways to go. They're still finding ways to make money off this property.
Yeah, for sure.
So here we have kind of the Rick dealing with the end of the last trade, I guess, with his wife, and the fact that Carl ended up killing Shane, saving him though, because he did pull out a gun on him during this whole argument. But who knows where that would have went, right? I mean, it's hard to say, but Carl kind of pulled the trigger a little early in that situation, let's say, but he made a judgment call, and he may have saved his dad's life there, right? Shane is definitely a hothead. And if you've watched the show, I think that's illustrated even better, quite frankly, on the show. John Bernthal plays a crazy motherfucker. I mean, we've seen him as a Punisher. We've seen him as some other characters. He's always a bit of a hothead, I feel like, in some of his roles. But
well, I guess it's interesting. This is one of the first flashback sort of issues that that translated into the series as well, where those flashback freaking episodes were those were the worst most of the time, but that seems to work in the comic a little bit better.
Yeah, I hated the flashback episodes of the
Well, because they flash back the good stuff here in the comic, and those freaking basically flash back to somebody that was just about to die, basically,
Yeah, so sorry. Yeah, so that's right. That opening sequence was with Shane. Sorry, not Rick. But now you see Rick and holding Carl and her at his gravesite, and obviously some conflicting feelings there, right? Because she cheated on Rick with them, and they had a thing, I guess. She had love for him at some point. He protected his family when he wasn't around. But yeah, so they're at the gravesite here. He starts talking to Carl here, I guess, about apparently, what went down, how he's feeling. You're kind of checking in with all the group now, the fallout of this whole situation. And this is kind of where you get introduced to Tyrese, who in the comic, again, I feel like he didn't really get his shine as much as I would have liked him to on the show.
Yeah.
But I love this fucking character in the comic. He is one of my favorite characters in the comic, Tyrese. So he's pretty fucking awesome in this book. And if you don't remember him from the show, he's the black guy who carried around a hammer as his fucking weapon of choice. And I think he was an actor. He played on The Wire. I forgot who the fuck he was on The Wire, but I think he was in the 4th season or 5th season of The Wire. And he was a boxer character. But I remember liking him on the show, but he was not as good as he was in the comic.
Well, I don't think he was introduced as early, and he wasn't as big a character.
No, he was introduced later. Yeah, but he did have a famous scene on the show that was also in the comic where he beats the shit out of a bunch of zombies with the hammer.
Where he kind of just goes in there, almost try and kill himself.
Yes,
but he ends up killing, going into the horde and freaking just bopping all of them.
Yeah, since you do know that, again, jumping ahead, it doesn't happen in this trade, but that scene is from the comic. So, he is one of my favorite characters for that scene, especially. And I think they did it. Yeah, like you said, he came in a lot earlier. This is the 7th issue he's introduced in the series. So, yeah, before Michonne. Michonne isn't even fucking here yet in these first 2 volumes. And Tyree, he was part of the group, right? I mean, how long he sticks around, I don't know. I won't say, but I mean, he's here right now. So he's a big character. He has his daughter here with him, and I guess a boyfriend.
Yeah, her daughter and her boyfriend.
Yeah. Which is
a new boyfriend, it seems.
That's right. So they all get introduced, and he seems very grateful and thankful to them, and they kind of ingratiate him into the kind of the group there, instantly. He's like, I'm gonna pull my weight and everything else. And he's a big fucking strong motherfucker. He mentions the fact that he was an ex-NFL player and everything. And like, you know what I mean? Like he's like, yeah, I'm gonna help the group. They know like he is like he's gonna help them out like right away, like how gracious he is and how much of an asset he is, kind of seems like in the long run. Like he definitely becomes like, you know, right next to Rick in terms of like leadership, almost like he's like his right hand man, like instantly, right? Because Dale's older, and you know, I guess some of the other women in the group aren't up to the task, and then you know, you have kids, right? So this guy, he does help him out quite a bit at first. Yeah, so they kind of get to know each other. They go hunt some zombies. This is where you kind of find out about him and the hammer. Yeah, and then what? This whole thing. She mentions she's pregnant to Rick here in this scene. This is when you find out that Lori is pregnant, which I guess is a big reveal because we know as the readers that she's had sex with.
Well, I said if you do the math, it's. I think they even explain the math either later on in this episode or later on in this issue, or the issue afterwards.
Yeah.
And then even Dale, he's got some stuff to say about this too. So.
Well, Dale's the one, I think, who's obviously the most outspoken about this. Even when Rick came to their group, he's like, hey, listen, I don't know the whole deal here, but just as a heads up.
Yeah, just watch out for Shane. Shane's got eyes on your wife.
He's like, I would not leave this man around. Like if my wife was there. That's what he said to him, right? And then, yeah, that was kind of a good heads up. But like, for instance, like this page right here, this was probably the last page of this issue where she says, I'm pregnant. Like this had to page of this issue, if I had to guess. So this first issue of this trade paperback, right? So probably issue 7 was when this was revealed, right? Introduction of Tyrese. Lori's pregnant. Again, there's big moments happening issue to issue. Like these are big things that kind of like you like stay stretched out over fucking 40 something hours of 4 seasons of the show within these trades, right? So it's pretty crazy to see all the ideas that they got out of these first 2 trade paperbacks. But yeah, so she reveals that she's pregnant, and like you're right, Chris. I think Dale's the one that does the math there and helps him out a little bit with that. He's like, hey, listen, this may not be your kid, right? Like, you know, and he finds that out, and you know, she was unfaithful to him. Yeah, this is where they have that talk. To your point, him and Dale, like he's like, listen, you know, if you need anything, but he's like, they may not be your kid. I don't want you to fucking go crazy now or get up in your head, but just so you're aware, that might be the case, you know? So he's like, listen, I don't even want to fucking think about that right now. Like Rick is not happy about it, but who would be? And yeah, this is where he trips over some fucking frozen zombies. Now they're dealing with winter for the first time, it seems like, since the pandemic, because it's becoming winter. And they're dealing with the cold, which is another challenge.
Yeah, aren't they in Atlanta though? Like, does it get that cold in Atlanta?
Yes. I mean, they said they're on the outskirts of Atlanta, but like, I'm sure they rarely get snow, so that's probably why they're not prepared for this. But I know that's like a big concern in the group. It was even a big concern with Shane. Like previously they were camped out, and now they're actually traveling actively on the road because Shane didn't want to leave base camp, and Rick was pushing him to say like, it's getting colder, like we need to move, right? That was a big point of contention with those 2 characters in the first volume, right? So like yeah, right now I guess it snowed for whatever reason where they are, and they're dealing with the fucking, you know, and they come across this estates here, this Wiltshire Estates, which is, I guess, an abandoned town, or so they feel like when they first come across it. So they're like, oh, great. We're looking for a place to
nice gated community. Yeah. Everything's good there.
Yeah, rest our head. And you know, this RV is getting a little cramped. Maybe we should see what these houses have to offer, right? So they go in there, you get attacked. That's what happens. So he gets attacked as soon as they go in there right away. But there's a nice little piece of storytelling work here, I thought, done in the comic book form, which you're going to see here in a moment, which we'll get into, that they didn't obviously suspect that all these fucking houses would have zombies in them. But I guess this was like a dead zone that they walked into. But that's unbeknownst to them at this point. This is like the first house I think they scoped out, and at least that they're all going to stay in for the night. And they're all fucking super excited because they're like, oh my God, we're going to sleep on the bed. And tomorrow we'll go and find out what other houses are available. And kind of like, this could be a place we could live. And they're all fucking, you know, so happy at this point, right? So they're just looking to settle down. So they take out these zombies. And yeah, this is where you see Dale hooking up with Andrea for the first time when they all go to bed this night. What's her name? The woman's giving out all the sheets to everybody, and she's checking in on everybody. And this is when the other woman that's with them, I forgot her name, she's hooking up with Tyrese, or she wants to get close to Tyrese anyway. She has the
I
eye.
think it's Carol, isn't it? Carol and Tyrese go together.
Is Carol, which is weird because this doesn't look like Carol from the show. So like, I don't.
Yeah, it's a different Carol, but
It's Carol. You're right. It is Carol. Who again I think was always bigger on the show than she was in the comics for that in that sense. But
yeah,
she's interested in Tyrese like right away, and she kind of wants to shack up in his room and all this kind of thing, and they become an item by the end of this volume. But yeah, this is where you see Dale, who told Rick earlier like his dick doesn't work anymore. He's like, I don't know, the plumbing don't work down there anymore. He's like, I don't know, I'm just trying to like, I don't have a thing for these younger women. And he's like, yeah, okay. And then like all of a sudden he ends up hooking up with Andrea because she like, you know, after the sister dying, I guess she's he consoles her, right? Gets some old man, get some you know, some young woman here, get some action. So this is a pretty awesome fucking scene. So
yeah.
Do you remember if this was on the show, this whole thing?
I don't remember this on the show. I don't think this was in there.
Me neither.
But it's good at the comic there where the friggin' the snow melts away. And you see what's going on there.
Yeah, there's a whole warning sign about all dead do not enter, which, yeah, awesome bit of storytelling done in a few.
I think this was the end of an issue here right now, too.
Absolutely, yeah, because they're kind of all, like, you know, you see them all kind of going to bed and all happy, and they're hooking up and everything else, and everyone's getting to know each other, and they're all enjoying themselves, and then, like, you see this as an ender of, like, oh, fuck, like, what do they have in store for them learning this about the town that they just went into, right, the housing, so yeah, this is Carol and Tyrese here waking up, and she's like, oh, sorry, in my sleep, I must have just put my arm around you. And she's like, it's okay. I like it. And he's like, oh, okay. So now they like, you know, they're into one another. And this is kind of where Rick's starting slowly to take like a leadership role, it seems like he's kind of like telling them how they're going to be dispersed, and you know how to use a gun, and you know how to use a gun, so you guys follow me, and we're gonna go into this house. Basically, he's like, let's kind of spread out and see what's going on, but everybody be careful, and you know, if you see anything you like, maybe it could be your home, so like let us know, and we'll kind of work it out amongst each other. And then this woman here, she ends up turning her back, and you can see a fucking zombie creeping behind her. She's like, oh, this house looks nice. I'm going to go take a look. And her husband's like, oh, just watch out. Don't go too far.
Yeah.
He's like, oh, don't worry. You worry too much. And meanwhile, there's a zombie behind her creeping.
Yeah, that's kind of crazy too, but that's besides the point.
So, exactly. So this is when Rick goes out to the front of the place, and he sees the sign that melted away there, the snow on it. And he's like, oh, fuck. Runs back to the town. And as soon as he's running back, this one's like, ah, like the zombie like wakes the shit out of her face. And she's dead, right? Donna, that's her name. And she gets taken out as a result. And
yeah, that's somebody's wife, isn't it? Alan's wife or something.
Yeah, this guy right here. And they have kids together, so he's kind of stuck with the kids as a result. And he gets, you know, really fucked up as a result of this, of course. And they all start firing off their guns. Everyone starts freaking out. Obviously, when you fire off guns, it alerts more zombies. So fucking more zombies come. And they basically just got to get out of Dodge. All of them just fucking round up and run back into the RV. Tyrese catches his daughter, this guy with his hands up her shirt for the first time, I guess. Getting handsy with his daughter. He's like, we don't have fucking time for this. Get in the fucking RV. So they all jump in the RV and fucking get out of Dodge there, escape. And yeah, that's it for that town. And this is when they go hunting, him and Tyrese, and Carl ends up getting fucking shot through the arm, which I believe happens on the show. I know he gets shot in the eye, which I believe also happened in the comic, if I'm not mistaken. But
yeah, I think this was just like a straight bullet in the show.
Yeah, so
something happened in the show that he was sick, where they had to get him somewhere.
That's it. So this is a big introduction here. We see the introduction of Herschel, because this guy ends up shooting him by accident with a stray in the woods while hunting, ends up taking him back to the farm where Herschel is. And yeah, he almost fucking kills this guy because he fucking shot his son. And anyways, he's like, no, I have a place where he can get bandaged up. And he takes him to Herschel. And I think Herschel just takes care of horses, right? He's like a horse.
Yeah, he's like a vet.
Yeah. So he ends up taking him back. We get introduced to Herschel, who is a big character on the show, and they fucking spent a whole season on the fucking farm, almost too long. I think almost 2 fucking seasons on the farm.
Yeah, they're in this farm for like two issues.
I think Shane was still alive when they first got to the farm, if I'm not.
Yeah, I think Shane and Rick fought out in the field sometime,
So
and that's when he ended up shooting him.
there,
And I think the time when he shot him, that drew all the zombies in,
yeah, because I remember that was
and that's why they had to leave the farm.
that was a big criticism of the show, was the fact that they spent too fucking long on the farm. They didn't keep things moving.
Yeah.
If you read 12 issues of this series, you could see why a lot of fans of the comic book were saying that at that time, because the way they kind of kept things moving in the book at this point in time, it's just like, why are we spending 2 fucking seasons on the farm when you got all these other interesting things you can get into, right? Which they end up doing. But yeah, Shane's alive at this point too. To our earlier. He survived this long on the show past the events of the book, for that matter, right? So he was a member on the farm at this time. So yeah, so we get introduced to Herschel, and of course, what's her name? Maggie is introduced here, one of his daughters, who him and Glenn have a fucking saucy conversation with each other very early on here.
Yeah,
because he has eyes for I guess Carol or Andrea. And now that he sees that her and Dale are getting kind of very chummy with one another, she notices this, and she's like, well, listen, if you just want to have sex, like, I'm down to fuck you. And he's like, all right, like, there's a conversation in this, like, which is kind of, she comes on to him very strongly in the show, from what I remember too, if I'm not mistaken, right? I think she was kind of always down with them. But Carl's healing here. Herschel has agreed to allow them to stay here during this period in time. You get introduced to all of his family, and yeah, this is when him and Maggie have that conversation. Yeah, now there's problems with Tyrese and this guy. He doesn't like the boyfriend. What's going on there with him and his daughter and her. And this is where you have a very fucking important scene in the book and on the show, where you find out that Herschel has been keeping dead family members and other people that were zombies in the area in a barn on his fucking property. Like, he thinks that there's going to be a way to, like, I don't know, like, cure these people, right? He thinks there's there's still, that's still his son or whatever in there. So he wants to, like, hold on to him, right? And Rick points out how stupid of a fucking idea this is, keeping these zombies on your property like this. And, that comes to fruition rather quickly. What did you think?
Well, but you figure at this point, though, nobody knows.
Yeah. I was going to ask you, what do you think, Chris? I don't think they leaned into how religious he was, like, on the show in this book.
No,
because on the show, I remember he was a very religious man. And I don't think that was present in this introduction of the character.
No, this one here is just like, oh, I just want to, my kid's a zombie. I got him in the, I put him in the barn. And, anybody else that was a zombie, I'm going to put him in the barn. And, when we figure things out, maybe they'll be good again.
Yeah, like, he's a man of principle. Like, you can tell that.
Yeah.
Like, the way he runs his household and the way that he is with his family and all.
Yeah, he's not such an old man here in the comic.
No. But in the show, yeah, he was a bit different, I think.
Yeah, he's more like the wise grandfather or something, where
yeah,
like here it says, freaking don't touch me, I'm gonna freaking shoot you. You'd believe it, but there,
right.
If that was the Herschel from the TV show, it wouldn't ring true.
Man of God on the show, though, not so much here. Man of God on the show, character too, right? So anyways, yeah, now he's trying to teach the family how to shoot guns and stuff like that. And very quickly, Herschel freaks out because they're shooting on the range, and something might hit one of the fucking zombies in the distance, I guess, that are the neighbors.
No, I think he was worried about hitting his neighbor's house next door, because he's under the impression that things are coming back again.
Right, that's it. You're right. Yeah, and so he freaks out about it, and this is when they see a straggler walking by, and he's like, "Okay, well, hold on, chill out. Like, I have a way about how to wrangle these guys." And Rick's about to shoot this guy right away. He's like, okay, fuck, I'll put up with your fucking shenanigans, like, whatever you think.
Yeah. Well, I did like the conversation he had with him, like, when he goes, when Rick says, or Herschel says, "Hey, I put him in the barn," and then Rick, and he's like, "What do you do with him?" And Rick is like, "I've been fucking shooting him."
Yeah, because Rick,
if who knows? This is comic. It could be, it could have went the other way, where you can get these people back to life. But he's like, yeah, I've been shooting every one of them.
Yeah, and I do like the conversations that occur between the characters. Like, it does feel like real life conversations, despite the fact that zombies aren't like actually, in existence. But still, like people's breaking, like the reasons that they are giving for why they're doing things seems sensible. Almost,
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like, I get why he believes that this is the right thing to do. I get
yeah.
why.
He's been on a farm. He hasn't been out there freaking, doing whatever he does. He just saw his neighbors go freaking crazy. I'm just gonna put him in the barn and freaking let's see what happens.
Yeah, yeah. No, I get that. Yeah, it's a good conversation for sure.
Not that it's right, I guess, as the series goes on, it proves, well, even as the issue goes on, it proves wrong.
Yeah,
But
he very quickly after this happens here admits that Rick was right. Like, and I think this is just early on you seeing that Rick is able to lead and he makes the right decisions, I feel like, overall. But I agree with Rick in the sense that, like, these people, this is not your son anymore. Like, you know what I mean? Whoever this isn't what you remember this person as, and nor should it be treated the same way, right? So, um,
yeah,
yeah.
I
So,
don't know, man. Rick starts overstepping his boundaries here when they do clean out that barn.
yeah.
I mean,
So,
hey, why don't we just stay inside? Just why you get the fuck out of here?
yeah, he does overstep his welcome for sure. And he goes off the rails in the comics too, like he does in the shows. Believe me, there's a
Yeah,
moment in time where he like loses you should not be leader anymore. He goes crazy. Um, anyways, yeah. So they try to wrangle this guy into the barn, and when he goes to open the door, a fucking zombie runs into the door on the other side, whacks it open. He's got his family, I guess, trying to like distract them on top of the upper part of the barn, inside the barn, and then all of a sudden he ends up jumping down his son, and so he ends up losing like his son and daughter there, or niece, or whoever she is there to him, and they end up getting killed right away because of all this scenario, the two of them. And Herschel ends up losing two of his family members because of all this, just because of him trying to wrangle this fucking zombie and bring him in the barn. And everybody just ends up shooting all the zombies that are kind of in the barn as a result of all this. And he has to watch his family get eaten. And he almost shoots himself in the head when Rick stops him. Because like he's kind of like, I don't want to live now, based off the fact that I fucked up so bad with my decision making here, and Rick was right. And later on, they're like, at the grave site, and he's like, you were right, Rick. Like he admits, like he's like, I made the wrong decision, right? So very quick life lesson there that he learns, a harsh lesson for sure,
yeah.
as a result of everything going on. But and like you said, he kind of, this is when he fucking catches Maggie fucking Glenn, like the night after her fucking brother and whatever.
Well, they weren't banging; they're just in bed together,
Yeah,
and she does have a good reason why he's there.
he does defend him, saying that she was lonely there in the bed and she needed him, like, that she wanted someone there with him. Yeah, you're right. They didn't bang yet, but you know that they.
Well, I'm sure they have been banging, but they weren't.
Yeah.
It's not like he walked in there; they're freaking going at it.
Because there was another scene already where he was sneaking off into the night. Remember?
Yeah, and he just took her off. Yeah, like after they had their conversation, he's like, "Oh, yeah." While I think that was while Rick and Dale are having some like freaking monster conversation, and I'm just gonna get some air.
Yeah. And yeah, this is when, like you said, he gets a little too comfortable, Rick. He's like, well, I just came back from cleaning out the barn there, Herschel. How about we stay here and
Yeah, this barn's gonna suck. So let's go. Your kid's just died. We got some. You got some room now.
Yeah, a little too fast. He's like, listen, I have no fucking problem having you guys here while your son's healing, but you're not fucking moving in. And they have a huge argument. And
Yeah.
Rick just fucking's like, okay, we're up and leave then. Like they fucking leave. They get back, call back in the RV, and they leave the fucking farm. Now, I will say a bit of a spoiler. This isn't the last you're going to see of these people, of course. Herschel and Maggie and Glenn, of course, Glenn, but Glenn does decide to stay at the end of this volume. Like he says that he's going to stay there with Maggie, and he spoke to Herschel, and Herschel was allowing it. But everybody else gets back up in the RV, right? And I don't know what the hell's going on here with his daughter and this guy. They have guns now, and looks like they have eyes to take out her father.
From what I understand, is they're planning to take off on their own or something. I don't know if that happens or not, but that's what I felt they're inferring. Let's say is that they're just going to go because now they got guns. And the father's not letting them be together. Like, we'll just go off on our own and be together somewhere else.
Yeah, you're probably right. I couldn't remember what's going on there, but it's just like the fact that they're plotting in the shadows. I'm like, I don't know what's happening here. But yeah, basically they all get up, back up in the RV by the end of this, and they're back on the road scavenging, and they come across what we know from season 4, the prison.
Yeah. Well, that's a good thing when you watch the show and then you're reading the comics afterwards, is, like, big things are happening. Like, if you were just reading these comics out for the first time, oh, ooh, they see a prison, big deal. But that's one of the advantages of, I guess, of being a fan of the show. Like, you might not track exactly as the comics go, but you do know, it does track the story similarly.
I thought it was always a good companion piece when I was watching the show when it was on the air and the comics were still coming out. And I actually liked the fact that they would sometimes change things up in the show than the comic, because it actually
keep both sides fresh.
It gave me something to look forward to sometimes, because there would be surprises. And I feel like sometimes they were even Kirkman being involved in the writing of the show, I think at the time, was also purposely pulling some swerves out of his ass, knowing people were going to be reading the comics and then watching the show. And then it gave you something to look forward to, because not everything was always the same. And
it's a few years after. He goes, oh, what if I'm sure he had different ideas. He probably thought about this stuff for a long time, especially once they decided to make it a TV show. You go, oh, how could I make this better? You know what I mean?
Yeah, to your point, he actually has talked about that. He was actually happier with the result of some other things that he changed, that he felt didn't work out in the comic the first time around. Absolutely. And then I feel like, at least based on the fans' response or my response to certain things, there were some things I feel like they didn't do a good job of. But I think that was normally a result of the actors, not so much the choice to do it on the show, right? I think it was just the direction of the show or the production of the show itself, maybe even the acting of the actors playing these characters at times, that made it shitty, right? So, and obviously there's a very limited budget when you're making a comic that you can show and do whatever compared to what you put on the TV screen as well, right? So I think there were some things they could do that were much more interesting in the book. But I think the cool thing about the comic was, despite the fact that there was always zombies in it, it did feel like a very grounded, real world that the people were living in, right? So, like, there's not, like I said, there is no alien showing up in this. I mean, zombies is a far enough stretch, but I mean, like, but there is like the interpersonal relationships of these characters and the actual places that they're visiting and the stuff that's going on in their lives is all actual real life shit, not, fantasy or sci-fi shit past the zombies, right? So, it always made for an interesting story. And then, you leave off on this last page here of Rick basically saying, like, we're home. It's perfect. This is what we've been looking for. It's like this is the oasis, essentially. And obviously, if you've seen the show, there's only a certain amount of time that they end up spending at the prison as well. So that's going to do it for this episode of Trade Talk, guys. Chris, thanks for jumping on here and talking about these books with me. Always a good time talking comics with you. You can watch us weekly over at Comic Shop Talk. Once again, guys, where we get into the new weekly comic books that we've read week to week. And who knows? Maybe you'll hear us talk about some more Walking Dead somewhere down the road. Maybe we'll
maybe we'll talk about the next two volumes.
About the same. Maybe we'll catch up with Chris once he's read some more, or if I continue to do it at this point. But I gotta say, I really enjoyed revisiting these. I was actually surprised, because sometimes when you read things for a second time around, it's just like, I remember this being much better. And I think this holds up, absolutely holds up. And I know what's coming, and I know there's more interesting things coming up for that matter, right? So, I might be in again on this. And make sure you check out the Late Night Chat Network, our sister channel, guys. Like I said, we're doing kind of a bit of a cross-promotional episode here of Late Night Chat, where we kind of just wanted to show guys what we're talking about over here, Late Night Collectors community. Make sure you're subscribed over there and you're subscribed over here. All right, let me see us out with some Walking Dead music here, shall I? All right. Later, guys. What are you doing?
I don't know. I heard some zombies coming.